finally, after nearly a year, we sort of know what the Sepulchre actually is. This mysterious place that is apparently the key to everything. However, a bit of news might have slipped under the radar. They talked about the Consular boss, the Natrazim, Jailer's forces, but in the interview after, they mentioned another encounter in the Sepulchre raid, and that is the Eternal Ones. We will apparently face either all of them or just a few of them, as they did mention the Natris in 9.2 in the final raid. Does this actually confirm that the Eternal Ones were created by the first ones? Are they just a copy? And what does this actually mean? Check out Gamivo, this video is sponsored, where you can get almost any game, DLC, Shadowlands, and 2-month game time at discounted prices. Use code ORON for an even larger discount by clicking the link in the description. If you're confused, it isn't just you. This expansion so far is the most confusing time in all of Warcraft history, pretty much for everyone, and I, as someone that keeps up with everything as I make these videos, am really more confused than I ever was. Currently, there are so many loose ends, so many speculations, so many questions, that it is literally just hard to wrap your head around all these facts. However, good thing is the story is finally moving in an incredibly vague manner, but at least we're learning new things and we are sorta progressing. We finally know what Zereth Mortis is, and the Sepulchre, well, sort of, but we're closer to learning the truth than we ever were. If you wanna catch with the up-to-date stuff, you need to watch the developer preview and the subsequent multiple interviews, as they did leave out some details in the preview, but I'll do my best to sum it up for you in this video, what we actually know, at least at this point in time. So we are going into Zereth Mortis, which roughly translates as the Death Keystone. Zereth Mortis is essentially the Forbidden Realm of the first ones. The reason it is forbidden is because it is quite literally the program behind the entire universe. Like, if you had a game and you went into the engine that was used to create the actual game, the engine with all the assets and with all the code, like the background stuff, Zereth Mortis is directly referred to by Blizzard as the workshop of the first ones. Now, the first ones are a really confusing concept, but thus far, all info points to the fact that they came in from somewhere and ordered the entire universe in their image. We know for a fact that they created the Shadowlands, but they also created all the mortal planes, or at least that is what is implied. Now, this bit is incredibly confusing, as Blizzard was kinda contradicting themselves in the latest developer preview. They said that Zereth Mortis is the behind the scenes of the Shadowlands that is intended to create afterlives, and it is tucked away in the very fabric of the Shadowlands itself. However, then they go on to say that through this, they also created everything we experienced on Azeroth and even the other realms we never discovered. So, does this mean that Zereth Mortis is just a backcode for the Shadowlands, or is it literally the center of the universe? I guess the only thing we can do is just wait and see to find out the real answers. As far as we know, the first ones built the universe entirely, not just the afterlives, and afterlife is just one aspect that is key in the entire puzzle, but things are hinting that it might just be the most important out of all the aspects. Now, if you're confused, as we all are, Zereth Mortis is the realm, but the Sepulchre of the first ones, where the Jailer is headed, is not the realm, but it is a part of it. It is in the center of Zereth Mortis, and it will be the final raid for 9.2. Apparently, it will defy laws of physics, and it will be unlike anything we had ever seen before. Honestly, to me, visually, this stuff looks like just recycled content from multiple previous expansions, but hey, let's just wait for the patch to be released. We might be impressed if something different is shown. They call the Sepulchre as the reality-bending foundry where many concepts and creatures first came to life, and this is what the Jailer is after. The Sepulchre is supposedly the blueprint, and the Jailer plans to learn the actual code of the universe so that he can rewrite it in his own way. I'm guessing this means he wants to become a first one in some way, shape or form. Why it is called the Sepulchre is hard to say. Some say it could either be a grave of the actual first ones, as they may no longer exist, or they were the first ones before the first ones that they defeated and just buried here. Additionally, it could also be related to our World Soul. Just speculation aside, this is what the new info says as far as we know. In regards to the new bosses, this was always the most confusing part. Were the first ones the actual creators that made everything from scratch, or did they come into the universe and just set and order everything? Did the Shadowlands exist with the Eternal Ones and the first ones just came in and enslaved them, or did they defeat some ancient evil and just place their own servants to maintain order, similar to the Automa that we're going to see in 9.2? The question is, are the Eternal Ones actually ancient primordial beings, or are they just a version of the Automa used to maintain all these first one created realms? To answer this, apparently domination magic will be key in defeating the jailer, and they mentioned a few encounters in the raid. However, you may have missed another boss that they only revealed in the interview about 2 days later. In the Sepulchre, one of the encounters will be the prototype version of the Pantheon of Death, aka the Eternal Ones, aka the Lords of the Shadowlands. You may know them as Denatrius, Primus, Kirestia, and so forth. These bosses will apparently be them, but just incomplete versions. Again, incredibly vague, but it can go two ways, in my opinion. Does this mean that there is literally a prototype of like the beta version of the Pantheon of Death, which might mean that they're essentially first one robots? Or does this mean that the Eternal Ones already existed and the first ones enslaved them, but they created like a prototype puppet version of them so they can understand how they work, and it's so they can manipulate them and enforce their mechanism of creation? Maybe they even created copies so that they can replace them in case they rebel. Honestly, with the way the interview was structured, I'm leaning more towards the first theory, because in a way they said something along the lines of, you know, Denatrius, well, what would an incomplete version of him look like? Something before the finished product we already saw. The word finished product might be the key. Does this confirm that Denatrius, along with the Eternal Ones, is literally just a first one creation? Does this mean that Soal himself is also a first one automaton, but ultimately he rebelled against his own masters? Now, to make a bit more sense of this, just because they were created by them, it doesn't automatically mean they're just mindless robots. Technically, this workshop of the first ones is a place where they created most things, if not all of them. So technically, all of us and everything we had seen could have been created by them, and we don't even know that we are just their robots. Most of Azeroth's races were actually built by the Titans, unless they just retcon this fact. But if the first ones created the Pantheon of Death, they could have also created the actual Pantheon, the Titans. So it goes along the lines of first ones create Titans, Titans create Titan Forged, and from the Titan Forged we get humans, dwarves, and the like. If we go by the cosmology chart and see that the Pantheon of Death are one of the leaders, it might mean that the first ones created all the other leaders of the various cosmological forces, even the Naru and the Void Lords, which means that all this stuff the Jailer is doing won't just affect the Shadowlands, but everything else in the entire cosmos. Now, all of this is at this point incredibly confusing, but this might just be some of the largest lore hints dropped since the release of Shadowlands, and this will without a doubt change Warcraft lore forever. By the way things are heading right now, Chronicle retcons are really going to be a firecracker compared to the bomb that will be this new first one lore. Thank you for watching. Check out the daily Redeem Savannas by clicking on the screen, and also check out Donut's Academy for videos on real world history and science. See you next time.